Let's get this over with.
Thunder Force. Why are we talking about Thunder Force?
Because AC/DC, I don't know. It's another excuse to put that AC/DC song in a movie.
Well, Van Halen kicks ass. I learned that watching this movie.
And
Okay.
and it made me want to go down in the basement and break out my Lita Ford t-shirt, which I don't have.
I don't know what happened. I thought I'd learned my lesson from super intelligence, but I didn't. And you messaged me something yesterday, and I'm going to assume that you were talking about the movie we're about to talk about now, saying it's your first 0-star film of the year.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I'd wound up not giving it 0 stars just because I think that there is an interesting premise here. It's never played out in a satisfying way. In fact, it's just a bloody mess. It's awful. Yeah. But I like, before we get to the adult versions of these characters, I like what was going on with the younger characters and the potential there. So, and I thought that the young actors were good. Even we eventually, even when we're hanging out with the adult co-stars, there's a teenage supporting character who I thought was great.
She was the best thing about this movie.
Yeah, and so although what they did with her was quite predictable, but really
and nonsensical. But we'll get to that.
Yeah, this movie is this movie should have just been called Nonsense the Movie, but it's a mess.
Well, so we should probably start by, first of all, saying what this movie is about. It debuted on Netflix on Friday. This will be coming out the following Monday. It's Melissa McCarthy and Ben Falcone, husband and wife teaming up again to inflict their awful brand of humor onto unsuspecting audiences. This time they're tackling the comic book genre. This is not, I don't think this is based on an existing property.
No.
It's kind of like Joel Schumacher-esque in that the filmmakers seem to have an idea of what comic books are like based on their limited understanding of pop culture. But most comic books are way smarter than this. So in 1983, there was some kind of a space event that rained down these
cosmic rays.
Yeah, filled with like weird gamma COVID spores that mutated a lot of people, allegedly.
Specific people.
They were nicknamed miscreants because they only adjusted the physiology of bad people, right?
Sociopaths. Yeah, people with the propensity to be sociopaths. That's what these cosmic rays picked on.
Mm-hmm. So fast forward. Okay, Octavia. Why do I have to talk about Octavia Spencer being in this movie?
I don't know.
She's out there producing fantastic movies with the Nelms brothers, and then she shows up in this. I'm like, I got to reset the clock.
Who's doing favors for who in this movie? I don't know. Like Jason Bateman lost a bet. I don't know.
He's the second best thing in this movie. Taylor Mosby plays Tracy. That's Octavia Spencer's daughter. I just wanted to make sure we get her name out there because I thought she was
totally. She's great. Movie. She's great.
But so Octavia Spencer's character, Emily, when she's a teenager, her parents. This all takes place in Chicago, unfortunately.
L Train.
Yeah, I know McCarthy and Falcone are. Well, I know she's at least a Chicago, and he might be too.
They're both. I think he's Carbondale. She's Plainfield. Yeah, something like that. Something like
that sounds like Mars Venus. He's Carbondale, she's Plainfield.
It's like she's a Capulet, yeah, Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah, so
reference there.
Emily's parents are on the L train one night and they get killed by an attack apparently from one of these evil metahumans. It's a giant green ray that takes out the train. She ends up orphaned, living with her grandmother and vowing to dedicate her life to the sciences because that's what her parents did. And she wants to find a way to counteract these evil metahumans, these miscreants.
Good.
She's bullied in school because she's smart and she likes, knowledge and Melissa McCarthy's character, Lydia, is a slob and a dumbass. So you've got like this bad buddy comedy going on. They have a falling out. Fast forward years later, Melissa McCarthy's character is a forklift operator. It's even worse. Yeah. Emily, Octavia Spencer, is the head of she's like the black female Elon Musk, the head of, it's a cool company name, Stanton 4.0.
Well, it's her last name.
I know, but 4.0. There's something.
I don't know what happened to 0 to 3.9, but okay.
We don't talk. It's kind of like Leonard Part 6,
Lord.
which we can't talk about for many reasons. We're in Chicago. It's their class reunion. I guess it's supposed to be 25 years, class of 94 or something. Emily is supposed to show up. She doesn't show up. Lydia marches over to her corporate headquarters
complex
after hours and expects her to be there. She expects to go to the front desk, and say essentially, "Hi, I'm here to see Elon Musk. Can you let me up?" And the security lady,
we haven't talked since high school,
right? Babbling a lot of nonsense. And she happens to actually be there along with a large amount of staff. Like, it could have been 4 p.m. There's people like milling about. They don't look tired. They look like they're on the third shift, which I don't know that much about every corporate culture, but the corporations I've been in, they have pretty good hours. It's only the freaks who stay after hours at the actual office.
Freaks and geeks.
So the lab in which Emily is developing her super soldier serum, trademark, is left open. Lydia walks in, sits down.
Don't touch anything. Don't touch anything.
Don't touch anything. She touches everything.
Mm-hmm.
She's this generation's Chris Farley, and it's really sad. Like, it's
and
so sad.
She doesn't need to be.
No,
it's like
she's a fantastic actress.
Can you? What's the other one? Can you ever forgive me, or can you please forgive me?
Which I didn't see, but I heard really good things about.
Please just go see that so you can wash this out of your mind. Even Falcone has a small role in that. You can. Anyway.
Okay. So she sits in a chair. She thinks it's a space-age massage chair. She ends up getting a bunch of needles in the face and being injected with this super serum. Emily walks in. She's like, "What have you done? That's the super serum. We spent 5 years working on it, and we can never replicate it." What kind of research is this? It's not that they are mining rare earths metals that take 5 years to develop. Usually research is like, it took us 5 years to discover the formula, but now that we have it, we can replicate it, right?
That shouldn't be the only one there. Right. They should have, stored one away, and okay, we'll experiment with this.
Especially
we'll experiment with this copy.
Right. And they were getting ready to test it on someone then anyway. They were like, "Oh, she tested a little bit too early. We were just going to do this other thing." So they were going to test it on someone, and then they would be like, "Well, I guess we got to wait another half decade for more." It's just so stupid.
Supposedly they were going to test it on Octavia Spencer's Lydia, right? And there were basically two formulas, one for strength, Emily. Two formulas, one for strength and one for invisibility.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And of course, the big joke is, well, Lydia is like, "What have you done to me?" And Emily and her team, who is supported by Academy Award winner Melissa Leo.
I didn't recognize her at first.
Neither did I. She probably put that in her contract. She's like, "I'll be in this movie, but no one can know that it's me."
I did not mistake her for Jodie Foster, though. I have to say that right now.
Any movie that can reference Nell as a joke, I got to give some credit to.
That's why I might give it. That's the half a star of my 1-star rating. Is you can actually go there. Wow. Okay. Nate in the wind.
So Lydia agrees to become the subject of further experiments because if she doesn't continue the injections, she's going to blow up essentially.
What kind of research is that? It's like we spent 5 years on this, and we're not sure, but we're thinking that if this goes unchecked and unmonitored, this subject is going to blow up. What?
Right. And especially if you're going to test that on your CEO, those are side effects you work out before you even come close to human trials. We've been talking about this movie for 10 minutes and we're not even like 5 minutes into the wretchedness. So I'll try and speed it along. There's a
Yeah.
whole bunch of montages. She has to go through these injections for 33 days. Emily eventually starts taking invisibility pills, because that's comedy. She's like, why do you get to take the pill and I got to take these injections?
Hmm.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump is running for mayor of Chicago against a female Latina opponent. This movie, the really weird thing about the psychology of this movie is I think Falcone and McCarthy were betting on Trump getting a second term, because this is not a end of the terrible administration movie. It's like this is something you put out in 2017 or just never, because especially now that we're a couple months into the Biden administration, I'm looking back on this and being like, yeah, this really feels like the jokes are 5 years old, even though it just ended.
If they wanted to be authentic with, I mean, which come on, I mean, obviously they don't, but it's Chicago. The mayoral race would have been like starting out with 16 people, and then it would have been like, narrowed down to 8, and then finally down to like, 3, and then 2. I mean, come on.
Well, they're at the runoff stage, I think. Like this is the last days of the election and everything.
And I don't think either of them are incumbent, right?
I don't know. I don't.
No, I
I
don't
don't
think
think
so.
they thought about that much.
But Bobby Cannavale's name for this Trump character is the King.
Yes, not
That's
king.
all we get.
King is a dog's
That's all we
name.
get.
I'm the king. Yeah. And he does, he trumps it up and everything, which is fine. There were moments where he got kind of scary in this movie. I was like, I want to see him play the heavy in more movies. I just don't want to have to watch this movie. Spoiler alert, guys, turn this off if you don't want to be surprised. He turns out to be one of the cretins or metahumans or whatever they are, miscreants.
When he sees red, look out.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I mean, we don't even really know what his powers are. It's just when he sees red, he gets angry and he can crush a microphone.
Yeah, it's kind of like an internalized version of the Hulk, I guess. He gets angry and he gets super strong, or maybe he's just super strong all the time and he holds it in. But yeah, just so many questions, as Edward Nigma would have said. They are two hero ladies decide to become the Thunder Force. They have cool outfits that, again, can't be washed because we need a running joke about how much the outfits smell.
So bad.
How does that work? They can develop these outfits out of material that can't be cleaned in any capacity.
It's so bad. I mean, it's like I mean, do we ever see them take them off once they're on? I guess we do, but it's just like, that would have been even an interesting joke, is just to be like, oh wait, we developed these suits, but they could come on, but we can't get them up,
There's enough questionable material around like body issues in this movie without getting into all of that. Like, I don't know what they're trying to do, because on one hand, it seems like they're trying to do the body positivity, beautiful at any size kind of a thing. But then they have these jokes about like their Batmobile is a purple Lamborghini that they can't get into or get out of. So it's like you're ridiculing them, but you're also trying to hold them up as like, these paragons of something to aspire to. I'm like, I don't get this movie.
And that stuff could have been easily remedied with like a kind of a meta side commentary in the screenplay. Like they, in that scene, Melissa Leo's character shows the two of them, I guess in their medical facility complex in the basement, they have all these car options. Why? I don't know. But it's like they're choosing the bright purple Lamborghini. I mean, they could have had this meta. Yeah, that looks nice, but it's not practical. I mean, look at us. So that would have been great.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Instead, we have to have this awkward moment. It's in the trailer where they're trying to get out of the sports car. Oh, it's so funny because you know what? They're plus size. And oh my gosh, it's funny. It's like, how many times has Melissa McCarthy done that in a movie?
Well, this gets back to my problem. It really is really driven home with super intelligence, but now it's this movie. She is essentially, like I said, this generation's Chris Farley. She's the fatty falls down. I have to throw up in every movie. I have to have some kind of like a horrible facial lesion or scarring or boils, which we get in this movie with the injections.
Terrible diet. It's like,
Yeah, she's just, and she's also, kind of rude and uneducated and slovenly. I mean, I guess in the last movie she was, smarter than this, but in this film she's so dumb and gross that there's a scene where she goes out to dinner with Jason Bateman's character,
Oh,
and I had to I had to go back and rewind to see if I'd missed something, because for that scene she's actually somewhat normal and kind of flirtatious
kind
and
of.
fun, but she goes right back to being this dumb slob, 2 minutes later.
Any part of that, I just could not. Yes, you're right, but any part of that, I just could not take seriously because, like I said, Jason Bateman lost a bet, and they slapped on crab arms with pinchers for hands, and they placed him in this movie, and he's totally disheveled, and he's in this movie, and he's really saying, I'm going to make this work somehow. Mostly, it doesn't work. And it's almost like, okay, that moment when they're at dinner on this dinner date, it almost seems like, okay, if we could just take this moment and all its weirdness and all its gross outness and random oddity and put that in a different movie, even a short, that would have been interesting.
Well,
It's like, what is going on here? I looked at my wife. We were both on the couch. We're like, what is happening?
oh my God, you inflicted her this on her.
Well, at some point she got up and she's like, the difference between you and me is I don't have to watch this. I'm like, there's many differences, but that's one.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, to your point, this did remind me of another movie. I don't know if you've actually seen it. I recommend it because the scene that I'm going to compare it to is much better than this one, although everybody disagrees with me. Do you remember movie 43?
You know what? You know what? When I was watching that scene, I was like, you know what? I don't know why, but I haven't seen movie 43, but this movie's reminding me of that. And I'm thinking, if this is gross out interesting to me, maybe I should finally see movie 43.
I recommend it. I mean, I think it's genius on a level that few people have considered. But then again, I can say the same thing about Freddy Got Fingered. But no,
But
I think it's the first sketch, because it's the premise of that movie is, I think it's Greg Kinnear is playing a guy trying to get a Hollywood script made. So he bursts his way into an executive's office at gunpoint and basically sits there for 2 hours telling him all of his terrible movie pitch ideas. So that's kind of the whole point, is like, he's an idiot and he's got all these great ideas for movies, but they're all terrible, but we have to sit through them. Kind of like we're being held at gunpoint. But the first one is Kate Winslet and Hugh Jackman going on a blind date.
Yeah.
And they're at a fancy
Doesn't he have a
restaurant.
penis or scrotum chin or something?
Scrotum chin. That's the better version of the scene that we get in this movie.
Yeah. And it's funny that I didn't see that movie, but yet I thought about it, and you were also thinking about it. So maybe this movie,
psychic messages to you.
Maybe this movie did something right. I just and then that whole like weird dream sequence. It was like a dance thing, and wow, it's like, I remember Julie Haggerty and Richard Hatch, and there was a Richard Hayes. Robert Hayes.
Robert Hayes. I'm going to say Richard Hatch from Survivor.
I think
watched that movie.
Was it Richard Hatch from Battlestar Galactica?
That too.
Yeah. But from Airplane, I'm like, okay, that was wow. This is like a weird dance dream sequence. But it was just like, it got. If the rest of this movie would have been that bizarre and so like jarringly odd, okay, maybe I would have given it some kudos. But this, it just seemed like so off and out of pocket.
It did. And, I think the problem is they were coming up with so many, it was almost like movie 43. They had so many ideas for what they could put in a movie. They didn't think about how any of it would hang together. Like that dance sequence you mentioned happens in the middle of a convenience store heist.
Is that what it is? That's right. That's what
if I remember it correctly, yeah. Emily and Lydia go to a convenience store. It's being held up by Jason Bateman, who is the Crab, because he's got these giant, crab pinchers. But other than that, he's got a normal body. We don't see beneath his shirt or anything, or his pants. So they foil the bad guys, but Lydia is attracted to the crab. And that's when she has this fantasy sequence about them dancing around. And then they just let him and the rest of the people go because he oddly blackmails her about like how she like roughed up his henchmen so she
It
can
would
get a
look
lot
bad.
of.
It's all on camera,
Right. But you know what else is on camera is those people holding up that convenience store.
Yeah.
So it's just so dumb. But then they get romantically involved later, and she claims that it's just to squeeze information about the king because the crab works for the king. I guess the king crab, there's a joke in there somewhere.
King crab, yeah. Old
Yeah.
Bay spice.
We haven't
I
even
just
talked about Palm Clementif, who shows up, and I think
ooh.
she's actually one of the highlights of the movie. I liked her in little doses, but when it was all said and done, I was like, I'd rather just kind of see a movie about her. But there was too much of her in this film, if that makes any sense.
Well, you liked her in little doses because she's one dimensional, and the whole thing is just her character is just so one dimensional, and she's got a great presence. There's a comment of like, does she always walk this slow? And
that was funny. That was
funny.
The absurd stuff that you're talking about.
Yeah. It's like that kind of meta commentary is like, that would have been fun. But instead we got like terrible knock knock jokes. We got Melissa McCarthy doing a horrible Urkel impersonation. What? But Palm was excuse me, Palm was fun. It's just, again,
she was Palm wonderful. Sorry.
Wow. Does that still exist? I guess so.
It does.
But again, this is just the material that they're given is just really bad. Like, there happens to be like this diner that Emily used to frequent, run by great character actor Kevin Dunn, and he's like saying, "Oh yeah, ever since the miscreants, I get nobody in this place." I'm like, wait a minute. And this is something that Falcone's screenplay doesn't address many things, but the miscreants have been around for like 3 decades now, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. At least. So you mean to tell me that like the city or, we don't even, this movie is very insular. It really only takes place in Chicago. So we don't know how the miscreants have affected the globe or any other cities.
That's for the sequel.
Oh, Lord. Or the prequel. But this, we'll have an 80s version of all this. But the we don't know what's transpired since then. So you mean to tell me this guy has had his diner this whole time and he hasn't got much traffic? Look, we're over a year in a pandemic. I mean, there's been diners that have closed because there's been no traffic. It's like, you mean that for 3-something decades, you've seen your numbers dwindle all this time and you're still, what is it? You must have great pancakes. I don't know. But the funny thing is that once this Thunder Force duo becomes popular and becomes like the first superhero group, in Chicago or ever for that matter, they become a hit. And then I guess then he starts to get more traffic. Why? Because people feel better about going out because now there's this duo fighting miscreants.
Look, yesterday I started reading because I haven't read it since it came out because I think I was frankly too young to understand it. I'm getting that because reading it now, I'm like, oh, I was a kid when I tried to tackle this. Now that I'm an adult, I get it. Kingdom Come by Mark Waid and Alex Ross. Good from stuff. DC. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That takes place in a future where the traditional Justice League superheroes have all retired and have been replaced by a new generation of punk, not like punk rock, but punk superheroes. And they're basically fighting each other and destroying everything around them. So the Justice League has to come back. That spirit was really missing from this movie because if I'm supposed to buy that there is this space event that affected a whole bunch of people on Earth. As you mentioned, we only focus on Chicago, but over the course of 25 years, all of these bad people have gotten powers. There should be chaos. Like Kevin Dunn is like, yeah, no one comes around here anymore. I don't see like things falling from the sky or other metahumans like punching each other outside and forcing folks inside their house. I understand this movie is worried about other things, but if you're going to set this up as your premise, you got to do some digging into it because those stories are much more interesting than what we're watching.
I mean, do you know how many people on your neighborhood block who have the propensity of being sociopaths? I mean, come on.
Well,
I mean, that would.
but even as we find out, the opening comic book explanation, with the panels
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
everything,
yeah,
that doesn't even make sense because it says, we're told by the narrator or whatever that
Octavia Spencer. Yeah,
yeah. Oh, was it? I couldn't remember if there was
I'm
even a
pretty sure that
voice.
was her narrating. Yeah.
Okay, you're probably right. I watched it at 4 o'clock this morning, so I'm a little hazy. But we're told that these things only affect sociopaths or potential sociopaths. How do we know that? Have there been studies? Have there been people
No.
captured? As we find out from Jason Bateman's character, almost by accident, because over dinner, Lydia is like, "So how did you end up this way?" And he's like, "Oh, my wife and I were on our honeymoon in Aruba, and we wandered into like a radioactive patch of crabs, and one of them bit me on the dick, and then I grew these crab things. So I guess
Then
the
she
radio,
divorced me. I don't
yeah,
get
and then
it.
right, but." The radioactive crab stuff, was that from the space rays? Because I don't think space rays are going to affect the ocean or are there sociopathic crabs? Was he a sociopath? He apparently wasn't, but he was affected by this. So that would have been a really interesting side story. They touch on it. They're like, well, we've got to make ourselves strong so we can take care of these people. I'm like, so you're ascribing an entire generation of people who apparently only have this one trait. It's like this weird sort of racist or nationalist metaphor that they don't go into. Like, is every one of them bad? Really?
Plus, this cosmic shower happened in like '83, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Bateman's in his 40s. That he would have been a kid. Okay, so that means that whatever cosmic rays or whatever radiation, whatever, was dormant wherever he was going to be going on his honeymoon for so long. And then when he got married, went on his honeymoon in that specific location, let's call it Bermuda or whatever, that something he encounters something or some radioactive crabs that lay
See,
dormant. I don't get.
I didn't even pick up on that. That's an interesting idea that it could have affected someone and not manifested until later. I thought it was just like because the way they presented is they were swimming and he got bitten by a radioactive crab, kind of the Spider-Man thing. I didn't even think about the cosmic ray implications being, inside of him at that point.
Yeah, I mean, even Cannavale's character, the king, it's like, okay, again, here's a guy who's in his, let's say, mid to late 40s. Again, he was probably a kid in the 80s when that shower happened. Did this affect him as a kid? Did he have powers as a kid and this is what he turned out to be?
There's a really cool movie in here, maybe like a dark superhero drama about potential. If this thing only affects people who are going to be sociopaths, what if you have like a little like 5-year-old kid or an 11-year-old kid who's, they're a good kid and they find out they test positive for this space virus because it means that someday they're going to turn evil. It's kind of like the whole, like, if you could travel back in time and kill Hitler as a baby, like, would you do it? It's like, he's a baby. Maybe I'd take him out as a man if I could do some Winter Soldier shit, but he's a baby.
Right.
But again, these are great ideas for stories that don't belong anywhere near this movie.
Yeah, I don't get it. I just, like I said, I really appreciated the actors who were portraying the younger versions. I thought that there was something really interesting and endearing with their performances. And like we've established, I think the young actress who plays Emily's daughter was really good. Of course, she's also a brainiac, but and there's this other thing too, that once Lydia comes back in Emily's life, there's unexplored things going on there. There's really no. They spend too much time with like 33 different montages of her training and her learning her powers and out of shape person, learning how to get in shape. This is funny.
Well, that's the other thing is they never really get in shape. Like all that training.
No. They stay in a shape. But there's unexplored opportunities there to like talk about like them even having at least one heart to heart. These two adults are like, I'm hurt by the fact that you never reached out to me in these 3 decades or whatever. I'm really happy for you, but I really missed you or something, instead of all these like sarcastic quips and, ignoring things and looking over things. And then there's also the fact that Emily cannot connect with her daughter, can only connect with her daughter in this whole brainiac fashion. There's the scientist geek stuff that they get nerdy over. They can connect with because it's in their genes. As far as the fun, having fun and the fun aspect of life, that's where Lydia comes in, and she connects with her daughter, Emily's daughter, in a way that Emily can't. That's interesting. Yet it's just totally either minutely explored for laughs. Don't, you forgot to turn your screen off. You're saying things that's really rude and obnoxious. Mm-hmm. Turn your screen off. But it could have been like, hey, I know that I've been gone in your life, and I didn't even know about your daughter, and I feel bad. Instead, she's like, why didn't you tell me about your daughter? It's like, look, you could have reached out to her in all these years too, to catch up on her life. It's like, yeah, at least this movie reminded me that, like, the whole man-child genre of stupid comedy that, Adam Sandler has mined to death. At least, you mentioned McCarthy is pretty much the Chris Farley. I mean, she's also pretty much the, woman child of, the comedy genre too. And she's like become almost like the female version of Adam Sandler, in his regurgitated comedies that just seem so interchangeable. It's unfortunate.
It's a weird standard that I'm still trying to work out. I've been trying to figure out what my problem is for years. One of many problems. I think it's that I hold women in a higher regard when it comes to the movies. Like, it's sort of, I understand the idea that, women can make gross out comedies too. I'm like, is that really your goal? Sure. Like, because the societal narrative is strong, empowered, woman. I understand that. They should also be empowered to make really crappy movies in which they degrade and demean themselves. And that is their right to do it. But when I'm watching it, I'm like, everybody in this movie is better than this. I think if the material were smarter or grosser or pushed some boundaries, like movies like The Hangover and that kind of stuff did, it would work. But there's something about Falcone and McCarthy's partnerships. It just seems kind of half measured. They're just poking, saying, isn't this edgy? Isn't this, funny? We're not supposed to be doing this. I'm like, yeah, I saw this 20 years ago. Done better.
I'm wondering, as I was watching this. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I'm wondering when I was watching this that I'm like, how, if both of these, talented actors were involved, Falcone and McCarthy, if they were involved in another movie, would it be different if either it wasn't Falcone's script, or like maybe he was just directing, or maybe he was just writing? Now, obviously, something like this, the writing is the problem. Yeah. First and foremost, the writing is the foundation of a bad movie. But what if he directed it, but it was somebody else's script? I don't know if we've seen that yet. I don't know. It's like,
I mean, he's fine as a director.
It would be interesting to see.
Yeah, there was nothing that I could point to and say that was poorly directed. It's fine. It's all fine. The problem is in the screenplay. I also, this is just a pet peeve, and I feel weird even saying this, but there's a lot of, they seemed very concerned about appearing to be woke and like uber progressive and ticking off a whole bunch of boxes rather than concentrating on doing anything meaningful with their characters. There's a scene on the street where something happens and there's a little girl standing between two guys. Look, and she says, "Dads, look, it's a superhero." I'm like, okay, yeah, we've got the two gay dads and the little girl. We've got, Emily as the little girl. She's all about like being into science, and I don't even think she's a good character because she's so one note. She's like, I have to get into science because I have to please my parents. Every time anything comes up in any conversation, she's like, I'm doing this for my parents. I love
She's single-minded, at least.
Right. But it's just, again, it seems like this, continuation of this STEM propaganda. We have to get girls into the sciences. This is all fine.
Yeah.
But there's so much box ticking and like, hey, we're on the right side of every single issue in this movie, that I'm like, just tell me a really solid superhero story and let me fill in the gaps for myself.
Well, on that note, I was surprised at how seemingly sidelined, almost to the point where she's an afterthought, that Spencer's character is. I,
Well,
I
she
mean,
literally is invisible.
wow. Well, the thing is that she's kind of not, yet she is. Her power is invisibility, but there's this weird thing that Falcone does that I think that's a problem with his directing right here, is that, okay, you have a character who's invisible, yet for some reason, and maybe it's contractual obligation, I don't know, we still have to see her, but kind of not see her. It's almost like this forced ghost that she's hanging out. Who is that for? The viewer? I mean,
I
because
think
obviously
so.
it's not for anybody, because she can't be seen by Lydia or anybody else, but only the audience
Well,
who are watching the movie can see this as this force ghost. I'm like, this is just weird.
It is, and I wonder how much of that. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say the other thing is that's her ability. I'm not gonna say it's her power. She is not powerful. That's her ability. She has this thing where if she gets into an altercation, she uses a taser. Yet if she uses a taser to a certain frequency, she loses her invisibility.
Yeah.
What is going on there? What's that about? I mean, they don't even do anything with her invisibility.
Well, they do one thing, and it sort of relates back to the taser, and I had to do some like mental math. Hi there. Hi. Saying hi to our friend.
He wanted to sit on my lap.
Yes. How long's he been sitting there? I just noticed.
Yeah, I just picked him up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But in the climax, when they're going up against Pom Clementive's character, who does the Mortal Kombat thing where she can summon lightning and orbs and stuff, she busts through a door, knocking McCarthy and Spencer over into this dock. And in that moment, you can tell that the charge disrupts Emily's invisibility because she is, visible for a couple of minutes. She eventually, I guess, the effect wears off and she turns invisible. But I was like, oh, okay, they're at least being consistent where it's not just the taser, but it's any, like, if she's in the proximity of any high electricity blast, then it can mess up her rhythms. They didn't do anything with it really as far as the story goes, but I was like, it's consistent. It's a nice idea. I'd like to see explored in a better movie. But as far as Octavia Spencer goes, I just have a feeling that maybe contractual, maybe not, but it would just be bad optics to have these two lead actresses, or it could be actors or whatever, in a film, but you give one of them the majority of the screen time because the other one's power is invisibility. It's like they're both fighting crime, but Octavia Spencer's just not here. We're gonna just throw park benches through the air.
She's smarter and she's using it. She has invisibility. They're not doing anything with that.
Yeah,
they're not doing anything with really either of those. And it's like, what? It's funny. At some point, I paused the movie, turned to my wife, and I think it was around the time where it was like early in the montage scenes. And I'm like, you know what? This would have been a really interesting movie if these actors would have been cast in the opposite roles. So you had McCarthy as this super straight, smart, person, who's single-mindedly in her, pursuit of education, and Spencer is the dumb, village idiot, as they call her in the movie. That would have been totally different and interesting.
I wonder if that would have cut too close to McCarthy's character from Ghostbusters 2016. Because she was, I don't remember much about her. I just remember she was a scientist and she was, I think, more put together. She at least had glasses. But no, I would love to see Octavia Spencer play the Melissa McCarthy role, because at least it would be something different. I can almost not imagine her doing that type of thing.
Right. And you could see why she may have wanted to take the role, because it would have been such a diversion and something different. I mean, she's done that before with like Ma.
I didn't see that.
I still haven't gotten the courage to see that, just because it looks so disturbing. But I mean, I've seen other disturbing things. I don't know why that was, But anyway, it would have been just so different. But there's the goal. The goal of this movie is not to be unique or different. It's just to be more the same. What better yet? I turned to my wife again during this movie, and I'm like, towards the end, I was like, okay, who is this movie for? Who is this aimed for?
Yeah.
Who is this aimed for? What comedy is there in this movie? And who's going to find this funny? I don't get it.
Here's, this movie aroused a lot of thoughts in me. And when I say aroused, I don't mean like I was watching the movie with my pants on, just to be clear.
Okay.
There's a trope in comedy that women aren't funny.
Ugh.
And there are movies like this. I'm not a fan of Bridesmaids. I know everybody loved that movie, but that was the kind of the thing that planted the seed in my head of, yeah, they can make an all-female version of The Hangover, but they just, and even in the Hangover movies, I laugh at them because those characters are so undignified. There's just something about seeing a dude bro frat guy puke his guts out or kind of get his comeuppance that just doesn't feel right when it comes to women, I guess, because I just consider them to be generally more well put together.
Yeah, just
So
beyond that,
right. So watching these movies and this movie in particular, I feel like it's not going to appeal to comic book fans because they tend to be a lot more well-read and smarter than the material that they're given. It's not going to necessarily appeal to, you know, people who want to watch a strong female-centric comedy, because I could just see, people on a date, like a girl saying, "Hey, look, there's a new Melissa McCarthy movie," and then she sits down and watches it with her boyfriend. It's like, these people aren't funny. This sucks. And he's like, "Oh, you don't like a female-fronted comedy?" He's like, "No, this is just not funny." It
We're
feels
gonna
like it's doing more to denigrate like female-led comedies than anything else. I look at like Trainwreck with Amy Schumer, I think was the perfect balance
yeah.
of a movie that had brains and heart and a little bit of a gross out factor.
Mhm.
But this is just nothing.
It is just nothing. And I don't. Again, we haven't answered our question of who is this for. I don't know. I think that, is this what the streaming services want you to expect each week for new features? I mean, this movie would not do well at all in theaters.
No.
I,
And
I
neither
mean,
would super intelligence.
no.
Falcone and McCarthy dodged a huge bullet with COVID, because I think they would have been looking at
Oh
spectacular
yeah.
flops.
Oh yeah. And I'm hoping that their part in the next Thor movie is very small. I'm pretty
I
sure it
missed
has
it.
to. Well, I'm pretty sure it has to do with another Asgardian recreation with Matt Damon as Loki and everything. They're doing that again. I think McCarthy's playing Blanchett's character from the past, the previous movie, where they're reenacting events. And who knows what Falcone's going to do? But
contractually, Melissa McCarthy, what's going to happen is she's going to throw up all over Matt Damon.
that'd be great. That'd be great. I mean, I think beyond the drama that she did, did she get a nomination for that, or was it?
I don't know. I know. I think the Chicago Critics, she was on the ballot and she got some consideration from us.
Yeah.
But
Can you ever forgive me? Yeah. Besides that, I mean, I liked her in Spy. I mean, I thought that was fun with Jason Statham, and
I never finished it. And I don't really have a. I don't feel compelled to do so.
There is a little bit of more of the same in that, but I think it just seems like more people were, more of the actors and the characters were game for what that was. I mean, Rose Byrne, Jason Statham, all the people around her were like, yeah, let's do this. Let's turn it up a notch. But like, in this movie, there's just so many oddball moments, or just flat out dull and unfunny, that I checked out, man. I checked out.
It's really bad when you see a joke begin and you realize that there is a punchline or at least a point, but you have to wait 3 minutes of like ad-libbing and improving to get there, and the punchline wasn't even funny in your mind.
Yeah. I mean, I think, like, say somebody like Mike Myers, especially in the Austin Powers movies, he was really good at taking a joke and kind of like stretching it out, and yet it was still kind of funny. It was like, oh boy, we're actually just still on this joke, but it is actually kind of funny. Even like physical stuff, like that scene in Austin Powers where he's in the little golf cart in the lair and he's in that small corridor and he's trying to back up, and they take forever with that. I like those moments. Here, there's that whole Urkel bit, and there's so many other, like the knock knock joke part where they prolong it, and it's just like, this is like, it's like watching, being subjected to a friend trying to be funny, and you're just trying to endure it because he or she's your friend, and you just like you want it to be over with because it's really not that funny, and you're like, yeah, okay.
You don't. I'm sitting right here, David. Um,
Oh, sorry.
no, I
I'm here
totally
every
get.
week.
You are. I get what you're saying, and you're totally spot on. It hurts so much because part of the problem is during that Urkel bit, because the gag is she has to act out who's Urkel is because nobody else in the
Nobody
room
gets
knows.
it,
I'm like, nobody, no, Urkel is like a pop culture icon. I know we're older, so he was like around when we were younger and more prevalent, but I feel like there would at least be some recognition. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, it's like Alf or Punky Brewster. It's like, we're way beyond that, and nobody really gets that unless they really get pop culture. It's like nobody in that room would have really gotten it, and if so, they would have been like, "What? Why are you? Huh?" And it just seemed like, okay, you're just gonna make fun of somebody else that you don't know in the room, even when you right there and then find out that this is your estranged best friend's daughter, and you're still making fun of her. What is wrong with you?
yeah, I mean that's not cool. It's like pseudo bullying, like what?
Huh? Is
Yeah,
she
there's no
is?
tact at all.
Yeah, I mean, she is totally a pseudo bully, and it's like, which is odd because she became friends with Lydia when, or no, she became getting these mixed up. She became friends with Emily when
When
she
she
was
was
getting
being
bullied in
bullied,
class. Yeah.
exactly.
So you grew up and became a bully. So great. But yeah, it's a weird thing. There's this whole weird banter too with the king and his goons, his minions, that is also very unfunny and prolonged. It's like he can never remember like who's left, as far as who he hasn't killed or what their names are. And there's this whole thing about, oh, call me Andrew or Drew or what. It's like, shut up.
Yeah, but yeah, getting back to there has to be someone who's going to sit there and watch this movie and just be rolling on the floor. I don't know who that person is. They're probably going to leave some comments on this video to let me know exactly who
There's,
they are.
that I already told somebody else this week, there's an audience for everything. There really is. And sometimes we're baffled by that. But there is an audience for every movie.
Well, I will say it's a weird kind of a telling sign. I opened up IMDb to bring up the cast list for this movie, as I usually do, and there's a big front page banner for Thunder Force.
Sure.
When I went on Netflix this morning, you got a screener access to this a bit early,
Yeah.
right? I didn't,
Yeah.
critics perks.
You didn't ask for it. You were smart. I'm
Well,
not
because
going to
I
pull
knew
that trigger.
well, no, I mean, I knew the timing of it. So I'm like,
Yeah.
we're going to talk about this on Friday afternoon. I can get up and watch it Friday morning. So I'm not going
There
to
you
go
go.
through the hassle.
There you
I
go.
went to Netflix this morning and there was this moment of dread again, because it's 4 o'clock and then,
Where is it?
right. Because it's not even like on front page Netflix, like brand new. I had to type in the search bar, Thunder Force. And I was like,
That's not
yeah, there it
unusual for
is.
Netflix. That is really, it's weird, but it's not unusual for Netflix. I don't know why they don't do that. I don't know why they're new releases that drop on Fridays typically. Why aren't they front and center? Why aren't they so obvious when you pull up Netflix?
Well, that's the first time I've seen that though. Like usually there's like the different ribbons and there'll be one saying like
Yeah.
premiering or brand new. And I
Yeah.
saw that ribbon this morning and they had some new things on there, but Thunder Force, maybe I need to scroll over like 9 times to find it. But it just seemed like maybe they, and I think on IMDb right now, it's at a 3.4 rating. So maybe they've wised up and they're like, yeah, we know what this is. Watch it or don't.
Yeah. I mean, I was surprised that I was so lengthy in my review. I mean, that's pretty much my MO, being verbose and all, but I was just like, really, I had this much to say? And it was more like catharsis, getting it all out there. And I'm like, hopefully I won't ever have to write about this. And hopefully after this conversation, I won't ever have to talk about it. But yeah, it's just, gosh, come on now.
Well, I haven't read it because you posted just a little bit before this
Right.
conversation. I will link to it in the video description. So yeah, if you want to check out more of David's thoughts, please do so. I'm happy to not talk about this movie again, unless, of course, a couple of years from now, McCarthy and Falcone assuming that they still have some cachet and people give them money to put together these, they're elaborate, they're expensive movies with special effects and
Yeah.
name actors and stuff. I just feel like at some point they're gonna get Shyamalan. Someone's gonna be like, "No, you've had a couple of too many stinkers here," but maybe they'll come out with something that's gonna be truly great, and it'll not make us reevaluate this movie, but just talk about it in the sense of like, man, that was so much better than Thunder Force or Super Intelligence. They've learned their lessons.
Hopefully, pseudo great, hopefully different, because if you watched all of these Falcone McCarthy joints, this is the fifth movie they've done together where he wrote and directed it. They've been in other movies together, but like Tammy was The Boss, Life of the Party. I mean,
I think I've seen, I may have seen all of those, but I don't remember any of them.
That's the thing. It's like, because they're all just blend in together and they're like interchangeable.
They're
Except
90-minute, they're 90-minute posters.
the only one that stands out is probably Super Intelligence, because it was at least trying to do something a little bit different. It was trying to do a little bit more of a serious romance comedy with a sci-fi bent. Okay. But other than that, it was just the same slobby, gross out characters, obnoxious. I'm sure there was some vomit and gags and fart jokes, but yeah. But man, I think if anything, this movie, by the end of the year, you will still remember seeing Jason Bateman with crab arms and pinchers.
I did like,
especially when he gets them cut off like that. It's like, what the heck?
Well, the other thing is, I know nothing about crab physiology, but it seems to me that if someone lopped off both of my arms in one fell swoop, regardless of if they're crab or human, I would have some kind of reaction instead of just like, "Oh, that sucks."
Oh, geez.
Like he wasn't screaming or anything. Like, do crabs not have nerves in their claws? Maybe they don't.
I mean, you could have been screaming like, this sucks.
I did like that his method of retreating is doing the little crab dance as he shakes himself off the stage. That was cute.
I mean, Jason Bateman is like, is this his breather from the heaviness of Ozark? I'm like, how I would search YouTube just to see if he did any interviews for this movie. Like, what was it like to when you first put on these crab arms? Did it help you really get into character then?
Ozarks was a Netflix series, right?
Yeah, it's really good.
I've heard. I wonder if this is some kind of talking about contractual obligations.
I don't know.
You do this series and then you got to do 2 movies and then you're done.
Yeah, because it's really interesting. It is part of Falcone and McCarthy's production company. So I'm wondering if they approached Netflix or Netflix approached them, because, with a lot of these movies that are coming out during COVID, they were once attached to a studio, Paramount or whatever, and now they are dropped on a streaming platform. But lately we've been seeing just like straight up Netflix movies where they've, approached certain production company, or certain production companies approached Netflix, I imagine. This is just straight up that. It was never really attached to any other studio, I don't think.
Well, I know that because I know they were filming this before the pandemic, because I remember back when I had my job and I worked in the merchandise mart, there was a big hullabaloo because for a couple of days they were shooting. It was weird because there were daytime shots, I think, or maybe they're just setting up for the nighttime shots, because there are like shots outside the merchandise mart on the river, particularly towards the end of this movie.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. That'll be, of all the books to be written about this era in 20 years, I'll be first in line to read the one about the effect on the movies, because I think that's going to be, there's a whole history there to be written.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, speaking of history, I'm ready to put this one behind us. Thank you very much for talking about Thunder Force.
There are other Super Soldier Serum viewing out there for people to watch that are much better than this.
Much better. And by the time you watch this, there'll be another video that you can watch with David and I and other critics talking about Falcon and Winter Soldier on Disney Plus.
Oh, yeah, that's the one.
The latest episode of which I think was one of the strongest. Man.
And heaviest.
Yes, in terms of like sheer, vibranium.
Yeah, and that's a teaser.
Yes.
Right there.
Well, it's not a teaser, because the the episode will have aired already. I'm getting all twisted up. I feel like I'm talking about
time
like,
twisty.
Yeah, yikes. Well, anyway, I'm gonna let you go.
All right,
folks. Thunder Force is now streaming on
Thunder.
Netflix, so you can be aware of what to avoid. Thanks, David. Keeping it real is David Fowley. We'll talk soon.
Bingo.
All right, man. Take it easy. I'll see you in a couple hours.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.